Hello, thank you so much for joining us here on the Skeptic track for DragonCon 2024. What was that? Ooh, wow. Okay, so was that okay? So yeah, we're random because we're in downtown Atlanta, so we're hearing random wild sounds. So we have with us today Jeff Hubbs, who this is his ninth presentation at DragonCon. I know, right? He's exhausted, but he does such a great job though, because we keep pulling him back in. So
You're too kind.
right. So please welcome Jeff Hubbs.
Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning. And thanks for coming. I really appreciate seeing you all here. So, guys, heard any good conspiracy theories lately? I'm a consultant involved in climate change and energy systems research with clients in academia and the nonprofit sector. I've been a regular presenter at DragonCon since 2013, and some of you may remember my Cratering the Moon Landing hoax panel in Skeptics track last year. In it, I talked about aspects of conspiracy theories asserting that NASA's Project Apollo lunar landings were faked. And today, I'm here to talk about conspiracy theories in a more general way and hopefully give you the tools to navigate your way around and through today's conspiracy theory-laden world. I want to give you a trigger warning. This presentation will include discussions of real acts of violence and mass casualty events. There will not be any photos depicting these acts or events. But if you find such discussions disturbing, you may want to consider excusing yourself. Some definitions are in order. Definitions help us give shape to not just what we're talking about, but also why it's worth talking about. Let's start with theory. One definition in the Cambridge Dictionary is a statement of an opinion or an explanation of an idea that is believed to be true but might be wrong. To be valid, a theory has to have explanatory and or predictive powers. A proper theory exhibits the property of falsification. That is, they must in principle be able to be proven false. I can't, for instance, prove Marxism or psychoanalysis false. A hypothesis is something you propose for examination before any research or experimentation has been performed, whereas a theory is an idea that's been formulated to explain something that has been substantiated by evidence or data. When someone claims, for instance, that evolution is just a theory, one useful response is that yes, it is just a theory, just like gravitation is a theory. And yet we can use that theory to land spacecraft on the moon and other planets. Similarly, the theory of evolution has held up to scrutiny so well that it sits at the center of all the life sciences. Moving on to conspiracy. A combination of two or more persons to accomplish a criminal or unlawful purpose. That's from the Perkins book, Criminal Law. Most of the conspiracy theories we're familiar with involve criminal acts. The Kennedy assassination theories focus on the incontrovertible fact of a violent attack on the President of the United States. 9/11 theories all agree on the existence of a mass murder. Moon landing hoax conspiracy theories, if true, assert that what might be charged as a conspiracy to defraud the United States under Title 18 U.S. Code Section 371. People charged under this statute include 6 VW executives who conspired to make their diesel cars cheat emissions tests. All but one of those are fugitives. One was caught and convicted. Enron CEO Jeff Skilling was convicted, and political consultant Paul Manafort was indicted, pleaded guilty, and was imprisoned. The notion of conspiracy law as its own crime goes back to English common law, originally as attempts to bring reforms to ancient criminal procedure under which people could conspire to bring false charges, and was codified as an offense in the 14th century during the reign of Edward III. Modern conspiracy law treats conspiracies as more serious crimes, in part because collective action is considered to be more dangerous to society. Members of a conspiracy can specialize in different components of a criminal act. For example, a trio of bank robbers can divide the labor up. The one with a fast car can be the getaway driver. The one who knows how to get the materials for and build bombs can be the safecracker. The one who is a linebacker in college can carry the bags of cash. Conspiracies have the feature of replacement. If I make plans to rob a bank on my own, I might remember Batman saying, "Crime does not pay," when I was a kid, change my mind, and there'll be no crime committed. But if I'm just the getaway driver in the trio and I chicken out, the safecracker and the bagman can always get another driver. Conspiracy law is a powerful tool of justice just because prosecutors can bring down an entire criminal enterprise at once. The first thing to understand is that conspiracy crimes don't need the conspiracy's intended crime to occur. Here in Georgia, all you need to indict for conspiracy is to show 1, an agreement between at least 2 or more people to commit a crime, and 2, at least one conspirator has to commit an overt act to further the criminal enterprise. The agreement doesn't have to be formal or written. It can be inferred by conduct. If I'm the bank robbing trio's getaway driver and the district attorney has evidence showing that I bought 3 ski masks in the summertime, gave 1 to the safecracker and 1 to the bagman, then all 3 of us have equal criminal exposure, which illustrates that prosecutors can use evidence against any one conspirator against any or all of the others. Ordinarily, hearsay evidence isn't admissible in court. If you get on the stand and say that you heard someone say they were planning to rob a bank, the person whom you're quoting isn't there to have their credibility questioned. But under conspiracy law, because co-conspirators are agents of each other in the crime, a defendant, informant, or undercover officer can testify to the actions and words of co-conspirators. RICO, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Laws, a type of conspiracy law. Federal law was adopted in 1970. Several states, including Georgia, has their own. They were developed as tools to prosecute organized crime, like drug dealers and gangs. Mobs and gangs tend to operate in a hierarchy with soldiers at the bottom, some underbosses and bosses, and ultimately some kind of leader. There are generally more soldiers than bosses at the bottom of the hierarchy, and since they operate closer to the public and to the actual crimes that are committed, they tend to be easier to catch. So the trick of RICO is to get people lower in the organization to flip, act as a witness against other better insulated co-conspirators, especially the higher-ups, in exchange for immunity or a later suspended sentence. So this gives prosecutors leverage with which they could bring down a whole criminal operation just by catching just one co-conspirator. So I've talked about theory. I've talked about conspiracy. Conspiracy theories, which I'll call CT to save syllables and time, combine these ideas by proposing the existence of a conspiracy as the proximate cause of a real event or the circumstances surrounding a real event. In modern society, CTs are pervasive. Almost any highly significant event that occurs seems to carry a CT load that spreads as quickly as the internet can carry it, occupies mindshare, takes on variations that also spread, and far more often than not come to nothing. CTs play games with what you know and how you make sense of the world around you. Now, there's a branch of philosophy having to do with the science of knowledge, epistemology. How do we know what we know? What are the limits of knowledge? CTs provide an opportunity to explore epistemological concepts. What's going on under the hood of these theories? What does it mean to know something? One element of knowledge is belief. Suppose I believe my birthday is today, September 2nd. It says so on my birth certificate. My parents always told me that's when my birthday was. But suppose the hospital staff hit the wrong key on the typewriter after I was born, and my parents were so overwhelmed with joy at my arrival that they lost track and I was actually born on September 3rd. Thus, I have this belief, but my belief is not true. I do not know my birthday is September 2nd. And there's truth. Suppose I believe I have a fatal illness. No doctor has examined me and told me I have a fatal illness, but because I'm a hypochondriac, I believe I have one. If in fact I really do have a fatal illness, even though no one has told me I have one, my belief is correct, but only because of happenstance. That doesn't mean that I know I have a fatal illness. To know, I need something else, a justification. Now, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato described knowledge as justified true belief. I need evidence that connects truth to my belief. For instance, if a doctor has examined me, performed tests, and tells me I have a fatal disease, then I know I have one and my belief does not depend on happenstance to be true. So when we consider, for instance, the Apollo moon landings, we have a belief that we landed on the moon. That belief is true, and we have an elaborate and pervasive array of justifications that connect the truth to the belief. The moon landing conspiracy theorist turns all this on its head and says that the belief has no truth, that is, it's false, because the justifications, no matter how many and pervasive, that would connect truth to belief do not exist. So we can describe knowledge as justified true belief. Now, it's useful to have a way to model conspiracy theories. I'm going to illustrate the way that I do it for you. CTs are generally based on a real observable incident. Incidents could be a single event like the Kennedy assassination or a series of connected events like the moon landings or the 9/11 attacks. Next, we have pre-incident indicators, or PINs for short. PINs are events that lead directly to the incident. I'm borrowing this concept of PINs from author and security consultant Gavin DeBecker, who studies acts of violence in his work. DeBecker says, no one ever just snaps, not really. The person who appears to just snap almost always leaves a trail of pins, some of which are plainly visible and some are not, at least not at the time. After I learned about pins from Gavin DeBecker, there was a workplace shooting near where I lived in Aiken, South Carolina, not far from where I lived. And whenever something like that happens, the newspaper reporters always go interview the neighbor, interview the classmates, whatever. Well, they found a neighbor and they interviewed him. And the neighbor told the reporter, I don't know, just kind of seemed like a loner, mostly kept to himself. I didn't notice anything unusual. And then the guy goes on to list 3 or 4 things that were unusual. Like he said he was going out of town, but he didn't ask me to get his mail like he usually does when he goes out of town. See, that was a pin. So just like with acts of violence, CT incidents have pins, and they can be used to discern the quality, if you will, of a conspiracy theory. At the head end of a CT is the conspiracy being asserted. 9/11, inside job. JFK assassination, Castro, LBJ, CIA did it. Moon landings were faked. Astronauts were really filmed in a studio. Those are assertions that conspiracy theorists make. Finally, there have to be conspirators, people who at the very least know about the existence of the conspiracy. Past that, they are the people who conceive of the incident, commit acts in furtherance of the conspiracy, or even act as accessories after the fact. I imagine a sequence of events represented as an arrangement of double throw switches connected input to output, like so, left to right. They represent sequences of events that could happen, and the settings of the switches result in what events do happen. So for example, I'll take my conspiratorial incident and place it at one particular point on the right-hand side. At the far left, I'll place my conspiratorial assertion, the basic claim of the CT. At some point in time, someone decides to do something that sets off the theoretical conspiracy. Otherwise, there's no conspiracy. In between that assertion and the incident are the pins. The way I've drawn this, the pins that were at least sufficient for the asserted conspiracy to produce the incident have come to pass. If either of these 2 switches were out of position, the decision to instigate the incident does not result in the incident occurring. For a simple example, let's imagine a conspiracy theory with just one conspirator, me. And suppose in this case, the incident is that I'm sitting at home eating a pizza. And suppose that the conspiracy theorist, having witnessed this, asserts that I wanted a pizza to begin with. The conspiracy theorist makes claims of 2 pins that complete his conspiracy theory. The first is that I took a pizza out of the freezer. He then claims that I put the pizza in the oven. He didn't observe me doing this, but maybe he had an inkling that that's what had to have happened for me to be eating a pizza. He has the belief of these 2 pins, as well as the assertion, but he does not know any of them. Although he knows that these 2 pins, if true, will at least be sufficient for me to be eating a pizza. However, these pins are not necessary for me to be eating a pizza. Here I've moved the same incident to a different part of the diagram. The assertion is the same. But what if instead of getting a pizza out of the freezer and putting it in the oven, I actually ordered one and paid the driver? The conspiracy theorist's assertion is in fact correct, but the logic he used to arrive at it via the pins he also asserted is flawed. There's more than one way that I could be eating a pizza after having wanted one. Getting a pizza out of the freezer and putting it in the oven is sufficient for me to be found eating one, but it is not necessary. Alternatively, the theorist could be flat out wrong. Maybe I'm eating a pizza, but that's not what I wanted. I really wanted a hot dog, but I didn't have any. It was too late at night to go to the store. So I pulled a pizza out of the freezer, put it in the oven, and I ate it. Now, in the real world, things can be very complicated. There could be long strings of pins associated with an incident, and there may be multiple ways to get from an assertion to an incident through the potential pins. One person acting on his or her own may not be able to succeed in causing the incident because one or more of the necessary pins occurred, but multiple people acting in a conspiracy can change roles, take on multiple roles, replace defectors, and adapt more effectively to changing circumstances. I've noticed that conspiracy theories often display certain characteristics that appear over and over, and after today, I hope that you'll be able to recognize these characteristics in the CTs that come across your mental transom, starting with necessity and sufficiency. You've heard me use those words already. The 9/11 attacks were a real conspiracy to commit a crime. They were carried out by 19 hijackers, and at least 3 others were allegedly sent as replacements. One of those was arrested 3 weeks earlier on immigration charges. They were coordinated by a Pakistani al-Qaeda capo regime named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed under the direction of Osama bin Laden. The attacks cost somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 to execute, not including the cost of training the 19 hijackers in Afghanistan. The same group tried to destroy the World Trade Center once before, using a car bomb in 1993, killing 6 and injuring over 1,000, and bombed a U.S. Navy destroyer in 2000, killing 17, injuring 39, after having tried and failed to bomb another Navy destroyer earlier that same year. And yet, with all this actual conspiracy that went on for years involving a lot of different people, culminating in almost 3,000 deaths in 3 locations on 9/11, some people insist that flying loaded airliners into 2 framed tube buildings was not sufficient to cause them to collapse, and that instead an additional conspiracy was necessary to cause them to collapse. One CT that circles around the events of 9/11 is that some effort was made to rig the World Trade Center buildings, specifically 1, 2, and 7, with explosives, much as one would to perform a controlled demolition. The logic seems to be that because the collapse of the Twin Towers resembled in superficial ways a controlled demolition, that particular collapse had to have been caused the same way. The 9/11 attack conspiracy theories have another characteristic to watch out for: inscrutability. Sometimes CTs rely on events about which very little is known by anyone, even by experts. Now, through our collective experience, we know something about, for instance, detonating a bomb in a parking garage, like what happened at the World Trade Center in 1993. But what is our knowledge base? What was our knowledge base for flying airliners into buildings, especially ones with a frame tube construction? It's only happened twice in history, on 9/11. Once it became clear to the nation what had happened, some of us who generally would have been older would have remembered that a U.S. Army Air Force's B-25 bomber crashed into the Empire State Building in 1945, but it didn't compromise the structure of the building, and the fire was extinguished by the fire department in 40 minutes. There are 14 fatalities and 24 injuries. But buildings like the World Trade Center's Twin Towers were built differently from the Empire State Building, so they could be much taller and keeping the cost under control. With no knowledge base as to how buildings of that sort might behave when penetrated by a fueled-up airliner flying at near breakup speed, for many people, those buildings' eventual collapse is not an expectable and natural result of what happened to them. The behavior is inscrutable. But multiple analyses by the likes of Northwestern University and the U.S. National Institute of Science and Technology concluded that the burning fuel, the physical destruction of supports, the stripping of fireproof insulation from internal structures was sufficient to deform the floor platforms that gave the frame tube exterior its stability. No additional conspiracy, therefore, was necessary. Incompleteness. Conspiracy theorists propose a beginning and an end to a conspiracy, but are unable to supply everything in between, namely the pins. For the incident to have occurred, there were real pins, even though it may not be possible to identify them all. And still, what the conspiracy theorist does is reach into the complex web of pins that led to the incident, if you will, and flipping the switches by hand until the assertion and the incident are connected. Ignorance. Now, I don't want to use that word here pejoratively. There are a lot of things I'm ignorant about. I don't know much about figure skating, for instance. I'm ignorant that way. But rather to describe a way of thinking that goes something like, I don't understand how a thing could have happened. Therefore, I don't believe it really happened. I don't know how that thing works or how it could have been made. So obviously it couldn't be a real thing. The assertion that the moon landings were faked often stems from this way of thinking. It took the modern equivalent of over $700 billion and a stupendous marshaling of American technological and organizational power to complete NASA's Project Apollo, but much of what was accomplished was arcane and difficult for the general population to understand in depth in 1969. In 1969, how many people, percentage-wise in the United States, would have even been in the same building with a computer? Not very many. It's difficult to understand a lot of the things associated with the moon landings now, although it's easier now than it used to be because there's so much information about it on the internet. But our stuff is still up there on the moon today. We really did it thanks to money, determination, brilliance, and being badasses. Too many conspirators. The more people it takes to carry out the conspiratorial assertion, the harder it is to keep the existence of the conspiracy a secret. Years, decades even, after the fact, the probability of even one conspirator coming forward with proof or making a confession or allegation that others could investigate approaches certainty once hundreds or thousands of conspirators would be required. So let's talk about some of the incidents and the CTs associated with them that have reached popular or cult status, beginning with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November of 1963. There have been at least three formal actually it's going to be four, at least four formal investigations in the assassination. The first carried out by the federal government was the Warren Commission, created by President Johnson's executive order just days after the assassination, just after he was sworn in as president. It was headed by Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren. A year later, it issued an 888-page report in which the commission concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald shot at and killed President Kennedy and wounded Texas Governor John Connally, but that neither Oswald or Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby, who fatally shot Oswald 2 days after the assassination while he was being transferred from a police station to a county jail, were involved in any sort of conspiracy. Louisiana versus Shaw remains to date the only criminal charge associated with the Kennedy assassination. New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison pursued a criminal conspiracy case against retired local businessman Clay Shaw. Garrison claimed that Shaw, former airline pilot David Ferry, and Oswald conspired to kill Kennedy, but the jury acquitted Shaw in only 54 minutes of deliberation. The allegation in Garrison's case against Shaw would go on to drive many of the CTs surrounding the assassination to this day. I believe it was also the first time the Zapruder film was seen by people in the general public. The Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, known as the Church Committee, named after Idaho Senator Frank Church, raised questions into whether Kennedy's assassination were an act of retaliation for rumored plans by the United States to assassinate leaders of foreign nations, Cuba's Fidel Castro in particular. The committee concluded that deficiencies existed in the government's investigation of the Kennedy assassination, and in so doing, helped to launch the event's second full investigation by the federal government, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which also investigated the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. It concluded, 1, that the original investigations into the killings were deficient, and 2, that the Kennedy assassination in particular was probably the result of a conspiracy. The committee was unable to identify any individual conspirators, but stated specifically that the Soviet and Cuban governments, anti-Castro groups, national-scale organized crime groups, the Secret Service, the FBI, and the CIA were not involved, although individuals within some of those groups may have been. It is also stated that there are 4 shots fired in Dealey Plaza, and that it was probable that the 4th shot came from the grassy knoll, which was the common name given to an area uphill, ahead of, and to the right of Kennedy's limousine. If you propose, for instance, that the CIA carried out an assassination of President Kennedy, you can try to find potential connections between Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who was arrested after allegedly shooting Kennedy, Connally, and Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit, and people allegedly connected to the CIA. But regardless of the veracity of those allegations, the one pin you would need for the conspiracy assertion to be true, presuming that Oswald at the very least fired at Kennedy, was that someone with the CIA manipulated or directed Oswald to do it, either personally or through an intermediary. That event, however, that hypothetical event, was never identified in any of the formal investigations. It may have happened, and Oswald and other conspirators didn't live long enough to admit to them if they did, or even really be questioned at length about them. But we don't have justified true belief that they did it all. This gives me an opportunity to illustrate the difference between a bad CT and a good CT, or at least not as bad. As I already discussed, the usual CTs surrounding the Kennedy assassination require the presence of a great many pins without justification and would have had to have involved a great number of people, none of whom came forward with deathbed confessions, left behind notes or anything like that, claiming anything that could be investigated by others later. Many photos of limited quality have been purported as showing puffs of smoke or gunmen besides Oswald. People behaving strangely in films and photos taken in Dealey Plaza have been cited as evidence of a conspiracy. They've been given names like they're characters in the X-Files: the Babushka Lady, the Umbrella Man, the Dark-Complected Man. They add tantalizing detail to this horrific incident, but they don't provide solid pins to base a CT assertion on. Now, in 1992, author Bonner Manager wrote a book called Mortal Error, The Shot That Killed JFK. There are lots of books about the assassination, many of them. Some of them go on to support this theory versus that theory. Some of them just sort of give you a fire hose of every possible theory, like the one called Crossfire that Oliver Stone's film JFK is based on. So this book describes a recreation that was carried out by CBS News at U.S. Army's Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, in which several sharpshooters, 11 of them, using a rifle like Oswald's, took aim at a target moving down a track meant to simulate the contour of Elm Street and Dealey Plaza from a tower with a facade built to reproduce the position of Oswald's alleged sniper's nest. 11 sharpshooters attempted to get 3 shots into the moving target within the time frame prescribed by the famous Zapruder film, 5.6 seconds. But only one of these 11 sharpshooters was able to reproduce Oswald's alleged feat. His name was ballistics expert and gunsmith Howard Donahue. Now, Donahue went on with his life after that recreation, but years later began developing his own theory, which asserted that there was another shooter besides Oswald, but that it was a Secret Service agent and it was an accident. Donahue's trajectory analysis, based on the evidence he could obtain, suggested that the bullet that struck Kennedy in the head did so from more directly behind than Oswald's assumed elevated position would have indicated. So Donahue began searching for evidence of a gun lower down and behind, and found a photograph taken by independent Dallas photographer Al Volkland. I don't have that photo here to show you because I haven't cleared it. It shows the limousine carrying Kennedy, the First Lady, and Connally on Stemmons Freeway headed to Parkland Hospital. Behind that limousine is another open-top car containing Secret Service personnel, one of whom appears to be holding up a rifle. Donahue found his gun. Donahue theorized that a particular agent sitting at the back of the car, sitting up on the back of the car with his feet on the rear seat cushions, heard 1 or 2 gunshots, leaned forward to grab the AR-15 rifle, rose to his feet, lost his balance, possibly due to the car beginning to accelerate, and instinctively grasped the gun with both hands, inadvertently pulling the trigger right when the muzzle happened to be aimed at Kennedy's head. A terribly, terribly unlucky shot. Donahue further proposed that the agents involved acted to cover up what had happened, but with no malice. Now, when you game this out in your head, nobody, even the secret agent who would have fired the gun in Donahue's theory, he would not have realized that's what had happened. It wouldn't have been obvious. I bring up Manager's book and Donahue's theory not to claim Donahue's theory as justified true belief, but rather to illustrate a way to evaluate conspiracy theories on your own. Many conspirators, unknown connections, many pins required, motivated to subvert a global power's foreign policy by killing its leader? Really? That's a large-scale conspiracy theory, but all these things about Castro did it, LBJ did it, the mob did it, all have these characteristics with gigantic, huge stakes involved. Versus the Donahue theory with few conspirators, known and solid connections. At the most, a few Secret Service agents and other law enforcement personnel like Dallas police would have had any inkling of this. Few pins required, motivated by recognition of unimaginable levels of guilt borne by one individual who had an accident and protecting the reputation of the Secret Service. Now, the Donahue theory does not presume Oswald's guilt, only that someone fired a gun, presumably from an upper floor of the Texas School Book Repository. It doesn't presume that Oswald fired it, or even that Oswald was in Dealey Plaza at the time of the assassination. With that limited scope, all of the suppositions and questions surrounding Oswald's unusual past, including his time with the Marines as a radar operator in Japan, trying to learn Russian, his attempt to defect to the Soviet Union, apparently supporting both pro and anti-Castro groups, marrying a Russian woman, returning to the United States with her, his possible connections to Clay Shaw and David Ferry. All of that falls by the wayside because Donahue's theory doesn't even require Oswald's involvement. Apollo moon landings, one of my favorites. Conspiracy theories have circulated for many years that we did not actually land on the moon in the 1960s and 1970s. Depending on the study, variously 6 to 20% of Americans do not think the landings were real. Ignorance and too many conspirators are characteristics moon landing CTs share, but there's something I should point out. Depending on where you want to draw the line, tens to hundreds of thousands of people worked on Project Apollo, even if a capacity several layers removed from NASA itself. In order to shave down the ridiculous number of conspirators that a totally fake project would require, apparently a vast array of contractors would have been required to design, build, test, and deliver working products, such as the guidance computers used by the Saturn rockets and the spacecraft they carried to the moon, to the communication systems, rocket engines of a scale never attempted before, a single engine with one combustion chamber that could produce 1.5 million pounds of thrust, and they had a bigger version on the way that was never they had a more powerful version on the way that was never put into production. Parachute deployment systems and spacesuits. Many of these artifacts return to Earth, where generations of people would curate them in collections, meaning that new conspirators would have to be recruited indefinitely. In other words, so much working hardware, software, materials, and artifacts would have to have been developed in actual working form that you might as well just go ahead and land on the moon. Consider that millions of people observed a missile 360 foot tall lift itself up off of a pad and fly over the horizon multiple times. Even if that's all that happened, even that's just doing that is kind of 90% of it. Why don't you just do the other 10%? Why not just land on the moon? Also, r- radio signals were in transit between the Apollo spacecraft and Earth the whole time. The Americans could pick them up, so could the Soviets, so could the Chinese, so could the British and the French. Part of the space communication network was a dish in Australia. They all could tell, each one of them independently could tell approximately where and how fast the spacecraft was going. Something would have had to have been sent to the moon to fake that effect. You might as well have astronauts in it and make them and let them land. So it's a conspiracy theory that eats itself. Now I'd like to close by talking about some things that you can do to help push back against conspiracy theories and the whole conspiracy theory mindset. Do not create or repeat them. Don't don't just sort of come up with something about some new event. Just don't talk. Just, if you catch yourself talking like that, don't. Did Mr. T say something like, next time you think about doing that, don't? It's as simple as that. Don't make up things idly and tell them to other people. That stuff spreads. If you see things online about conspiracy theories, memes, stories, whatever, Reddit posts, don't recirculate them. Let yourself be the control rod that keeps that nuclear reactor of conspiracy theory um, spread idle. Gently refute them when you get an opportunity, or make light of them. As some I thought of last night. You know, you know that thing where that urban myth that Walt Disney wasn't buried when he died, that he was instead cryogenically frozen so that he could be revived later when the technology made that possible. So whenever anyone says, "God, can you believe so and so is a Disney movie?" And I'll go, "Yeah, I bet Walt Disney is rolling in his grave or sloshing around in his nitrogen." And then you go, "No, no, that's not true. That's garbage." So whenever these things come up, you can just gently refute them, make an effort, or make a joke out of them. Now, this one I'm real serious about. We've been having fun, but I want to be real serious about this. Protect the institutions in our society that find and distribute facts. In, we have this built into to our society because truth is a part of democracy. Transparency is a part of democracy. We have organizations that deal in this stuff. We have schools. We have other processes that do this. So if there are institutions that you care about, don't call them your institutions unless you make them yours by defending them. It can be a school, a court, a law, a commission, a board, a newsroom, a reporter, a newspaper, a magazine. Protect these institutions in some way, even if it means uh, buy a subscription to an online newspaper. Um, Call a radio station and ask them why they don't have a proper newsroom. Um, Tell them that you'll support the advertisers who will advertise on a news show that they produce. Tell your elected officials that facts are important to you. Keep them aware that you are paying attention. People um, who would want to subvert democracy will do so by making truth go away. They would want you to get to the point where it's so hard to tell what is real, they would want you to stop caring. Never stop caring. Make sure that it's important to you. Make sure that the people who have governance over us realize that we care about the truth. And reject political candidates who say things that are demonstrably false. I'm not talking about people who will shade things, spin things, maybe erroneously say something or oversimplify something that's kind of complicated. I'm talking about things that are just demonstrably, absolutely false. Reject those candidates and tell your friends and family to too. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to entertain your questions. We do have a microphone up here in the center. If you'd like to ask questions so that everyone can hear you.
What's your favorite conspiracy theory, or do you have one?
Oh, you know that answer.
Well, they don't, so talk.
It's the moon landing stuff.
Sure.
Because there's so many interesting things about what we actually did to land on the moon that the things that the little details that conspiracy theorists will say about the moon landings, again, arising from ignorance of how things really work. If you go and investigate how they really work, it's fascinating what actually happened. Um, just an example. Um, they'll say we couldn't have gotten we couldn't have gotten to the moon because the radiation would have killed them. The Van Allen belts are there's too much radiation there. Yeah, there is too much radiation in the Van Allen belts. That's why we didn't stay in them very long. It's also why NASA had solar astronomers who had no-go authority. They would cause a launch to be scrubbed if there was so much sunspot activity, which, if there had been a coronal mass ejection headed at the Earth-Moon system at the time, it would have killed the astronauts dead in transit, and there wouldn't have been a thing to be able to do to protect them. So that's an example of if you discover the truth about something, you go, oh, aren't we badasses that we figured that out?
We totally are. Hi.
Hi. So a relatively new conspiracy theory that's out there that is coming from people that I like otherwise are the people who are saying the Trump assassination was faked. Because if it had been a real bullet, his ear would have been more messed up, or this or that, or Trump would be calling for investigation, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is friendly fire. These are people otherwise I'm down with entirely, but I don't see any evidence supporting that particular. So can you just give a little more advice on how, specifically, gently say, look, I'm with you politically, but I'm not with you on this, and without alienating them?
Well, it's like I said, what I started to say. Heard any good conspiracy theories lately? Yeah, because like the day it happened, everything was all over the internet. Um, here's here's what I tried to do. Okay, and I didn't take this very far because I do have other stuff in my life to do. Okay, but start with what is the incident? The incident was there were shots fired at that rally. Okay, that much you know, and then you start drilling down to what more do you know? How many shots were fired? Where did they land? Um, where was the shot? Where were the shots fired from? These are all I guess post incident indicators that are kind of part of the incident itself. We know that there was a nice high quality camera um, pointed at the former president at the time shots were fired. They were caught on audio. Um, Nothing was explicitly caught on video, as far as I know, that that showed an impact. What happened to Trump's ear? I don't know. It appeared to bleed. He did this during the course of shots being fired. I haven't seen anything definitive about why his ear was bleeding or or what struck him or anything like that. So we don't need a lot of um, things to be necessary to observe the incident that we observed. We know something about the shooter. We know that he was neutralized quickly. We know that he was kind of firing under duress because a policeman was trying to climb on the roof, who fell backward when the attempted assassin swung his gun around at him. So he was getting his shots off, knowing that he was cornered. Um, but beyond that, is any more is and then we have some information about the shooter's background. Okay, and we know he had a gun. We have photographs and video of him in the at the rally. Isn't that sufficient to observe what we've observed? Yes, it's sufficient. We don't have anything else being necessary to observe what we saw.
Yep, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I've
You're very welcome.
really enjoyed the panel so far. I something that has struck me listening, especially to your last bit about protecting institutions that disseminate facts and that are committed to things like that, is that as someone who's interested in politics and as someone who is just a regular person, it strikes me that I will likely never have, and most of us in this room will probably never truly have access to the level of power, to the level of knowledge of these facts about these events, and the level of systems that actually get to create meaningful responses to these events. And what I mean by that is many of us will likely never be the pinnacle of government. Many of us will never actually have that capacity and power to truly respond to these events in a way other than just, do I believe this happened or not? And so I guess I'm wondering, it's a two-part question, I guess. First of all, what is your response to the idea that we are just going to have to be comfortable with not knowing and we're comfortable with uncertainty about certain things as individuals? Because yes, we can have justified true belief. We can, evaluate things that we are able to observe and form our opinions about them, but ultimately we might never truly know. That concept is just something I've kind of struggled with generally.
Mm-hmm.
And also, how are we supposed to therefore square the fact that we might never actually have access to the level of power and the level of influence in these systems that get to respond to these events? Like, am I really supposed to just kind of trust that the government, who, in my opinion, we have two parties who in some ways have very similar beliefs when it comes to certain systems, am I really supposed to essentially just believe that they have our democracy in their true best interest? Like, how do I square the fact that I'm never going to have access to truly knowing these types of things, especially when it comes to power and systemic things?
That's a good question. The con- conspiracy theories that surround what are actually murders. Murder has no statute of limitations in any American jurisdiction that I'm aware. Okay, if someone, if evidence were found today that were sufficient to convict someone in a conspiracy to kill John Kennedy, even though it happened 60 years ago, that person could be arrested, tried, convicted. I mean, at least on paper, because there is no statute of limitations there. Um, there's there's an author and Yale history professor named Timothy Snyder, who I'm a big fan of. He wrote a book called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. And one of the lessons he has in that, it's a small book. It's bathroom reading. Finish a lesson. You can read a lesson just sitting there and go about and go on your way. But he talks about the importance of what he has a saying in one of the lessons: power wants you softening in your chair. One of the lessons is investigate, find things out for yourself, read books. There are people who have explored this problem before about systemic lying from on high. That has been explored to death. Read their books. They've talked about this. We have a lot we can learn from people in the 20th century who have gone through some of these things before. Consider running for elected office is another recommendation that he makes. Um, consider um, starting your own Substack. Investigate some things, use journalistic principles as you do so, and write about them. We still have a First Amendment with freedom of expression. You can you, you can write things that are true. What you find, you investigate. A lot of times, conspiracy theories. What are you going to do with this knowledge? Even if the conspiracy theory is true, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with the idea that someone wanted the? What are you going to do with the assertion that 9/11 was some kind of inside job? Well, nothing. What are you going to do with that knowledge?
But it
Maybe
makes
your
people
time.
feel in control and powerful.
There is a thing, something I mentioned in the moon landing hoax was everyone wants to be the smartest guy in the room, right? You're sitting at a bar, someone talks about, you remember when John Kennedy was killed? And someone says, I know the answer. I've got this. Listen to this, and reels off one conspiracy theory after another. That guy now feels like he's in command of something in a world that can make you feel very insignificant, small, and ignorant. So resist that urge to try to be the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah, because you ought to be in a different room, right?
Yeah,
If you're,
yeah.
if you're the smartest one in the room. So we still have about 8 minutes left. If anybody has any other questions, Jeff knows a great deal of things for a man his age.
What are you insinuating?
I got nothing. I don't know. Well, tell us about your other panels. What else have you talked on?
Let's see. I did a panel on evaluating and restoring vintage electronics in robotics maker track. I did one on tornadoes in science track. I'm going to leave from here and go next door to science track to do one on the science of music. I brought a little keyboard that I'm going to connect to my laptop for that one. I've done one about nuclear devastation, and so yeah, this part is the best. This is the busiest Dragon Con I've ever had, and probably the busiest I'm ever gonna have,
Oh, God.
because this has taken a lot out of
It's a
me.
big one. So what's your favorite fact about tornadoes? Or your favorite misconception about tornadoes?
Um, well, one thing well, part of the reason why this panel existed because the movie Twisters just came out, the sequel to Twister, and in that movie, our heroes take these portable radar kits that are about yay big and lay 3 of them down around where they think a tornado is going to be. And I kind of wanted to explore how feasible that was because I used to work in radar when I worked for the Air Force. And actually, the answer is kind of feasible. What they were, I mean, naturally, the prop they built was fake, but there were things about it that actually looked like real things that could have worked in a real frequency and range regime that it was supposed to build like a 3D image of a tornado in progress. And yeah, kind of. It made sense.
Okay, cool. Do you have any? Where can people get in touch with you? We'll start doing some shameless plugs if anybody thinks of any.
See
other
the
questions.
screens. My LinkedIn, my threads, my email are on the
Okay.
screens.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming to the Skeptic Track again.
Thank you,
I
Angie.
apologize about the scheduling issues, but we got it all worked out. It always kind of end up working out. It's always just very upsetting in the meantime. So thank y'all so much for coming. We'll give you a little bit of extra time off so you can prepare for your next lecture. We have one in here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Dr. Dana Bevan is back with us again today. We can't wait to hear from her. Y'all have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon.